What I always go in and tell organizations is it's okay if you get compromised. It's okay if you get broken into, if you detect it in a timely manner when the damage is small. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's episode of Life of a CISO. And I have one question for you. We could just call this the CISO, because what other life would you want to live than the life of a CISO, right? We are living the dream, right? We have an amazing job, whether you are a CISO, you want to be a CISO, or you're thinking about becoming a CISO. It is such an amazing career because you get to go in and help an organization build out the strategy that keeps them safe, keeps them secure, and keeps them protected. So I appreciate you joining me on this episode, one of my favorite times of the week when I get to jump in the studio, just shut off all my tech for 30 to 40 minutes, and I just get to spend some time with you. So I appreciate you spending time with me. And once again, this is Dr. Eric Cole, and welcome to this week's episode of Life of a CISO. And I love questions, so please post a comment to this question, whether you like it, how I can improve it, or if there are other topics that you would like me to cover. And one of the questions that I get a lot that I'd like to address on this episode is, why do breaches happen? Why do breaches happen? Why do they occur? Because if companies are spending time, energy, and effort on trying to address the problem, why are they still getting broken into and why are they still getting compromised? Because one thing I will tell you, if you go in and I ask you right now, make a short list of, if you had to advise a company at a high strategic level, what are the 4 or 5 things you would have them do? Most of us on our list, we would write down things like you have to have a strong policy, you have to have user awareness, you have to have firewalls, you have to have IDSs, you might put down you have to have a security incident and event management solution, a couple of other things, right? And you look and say, that's a really good list. Here's the problem. If you look at all of the companies that have suffered major breaches over the last several years, guess what they all have in common? They all have policies. They all have user awareness. They all have firewalls. They all have security incident event management. They all have logging. They all have budgets. They all have security teams, and they've all gotten breached. And the problem is this: they are doing good things, but they're not focused in on the right things that really matter. So what I want to do in this episode is really go in and focus in on what are the important things that organizations need to focus on. And what it comes down to is a simple phrase. It's one of the phrases that I've coined a long time ago. And since then, many people have taken it, and I love it because that's the best compliment, when people take your phrases and quotes and utilize them. But probably one of the quotes that I'm most famous for is, prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. And that's the problem. Most organizations are focusing all their energy and effort on prevention. And when preventive measures fail, because they will, there's no detection in place. There's no detection left in place. And if you don't believe me, this one I'm going to make a little more interactive. I'm going to give you some homework that if you're a CISO and you want to clearly understand where the problem is with your clients, and you want to be able to come up with a clear-cut strategy, I'm going to show you how to do that. But everything in security starts with having an accurate, up-to-date network diagram. So if you do not have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram, do not pass go, do not collect $200, do that immediately. And I know I'll sometimes get pushback going, but Eric, the environment is too complicated, or it's too hard, or we can't do that. Let me ask you a question. If you don't understand your environment and know how it's interconnected together, how can you make any claim on the overall security? Let me put it a different way. If you don't have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram, you can't make any claims of whether you're secure or not, because you don't know where anything's interconnected or how anything is set up. But Eric, I have a firewall. Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest fallacies and mistakes that we see. Companies do what we call appliance-based security. I have a firewall, therefore I'm secure. I have artificial intelligence-based behavioral detection, therefore I'm secure. Guess what? Technology doesn't help you if it's not designed and configured correctly. And design comes down to placement on the network. If you don't have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram, how do you know where your firewall is placed on the network? How do you know that servers are not in front of the firewall and are being attacked directly? You don't. So one of the first things and one of the most important things in order to make good, accurate decisions as a chief information security officer is you must have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram for your client. Now, once again, I'll often get people going, but Eric, don't we need to go in and assess risk? Don't we need to understand where the big exposures are? Question: how are you going to do that if you don't have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram? How are you going to assess the risk if you don't know how your network's configured? How are you going to assess the risk if you don't know where devices are set up and configured? So you want to make sure that you have that good foundation in place, and it all starts with an accurate, up-to-date network diagram. So once you have your accurate, up-to-date network diagram, I want you to take a colored pen. Right? I love these things. These are my favorite tool, right? Colored pens are awesome. They're magical. Not as magical as flying unicorns and rainbows, right? But they come pretty darn close, right? So with that, whenever I want to go in and do work for clients, I always have my magical unicorn fetch me my 4-colored pen, right? So pick one of the colors, and I want you to go in on that accurate, up-to-date network diagram, and I want you to start labeling your devices. All your devices that are preventive, that are in line, meant to stop an attack, I want you to put a P. I want you to put a P on those, preventive. All of your devices that are detective, I want you to put a D. And I want you to add it up. If you're like most of our clients, 88% of all your security is preventive and less than 12% is detective, which means if preventive measures fail, you miss the adversary. And here's the problem. Preventive measures, by nature of how they work, are going to have a high false negative. A high false negative is when you deem attacks as normal traffic. So you're watching going up, normal, it's okay. And in reality, it's an attack, and false negatives are very, very dangerous. And here's why. Preventive devices can only block things that are 100% bad 100% of the time. So if you have something that is bad 80% of the time, what does your preventive device have to do? It has to allow it through. Why? Because if it blocks something that's 80% bad, that means it's blocking 20% legitimate traffic. And if you're blocking 20% legitimate traffic, that is unacceptable. There is no company on the planet that is going to tell security, yes, in the name of security, you can block 20% of our legitimate clients. You can block 20% of our revenue. You can block 20% of internal valid communication. It's not going to pass. Remember, one of the golden rules of cybersecurity is cybersecurity cannot negatively impact the business. And if you're blocking something that's 80% bad, which means it's blocking 20% legitimate traffic, that is going to be unacceptable and not allowed. So that means those preventive devices are going to have to allow through all those attacks. Unless it's 100% sure, it will allow those attack traffics through. So by nature of just how they're designed and how they're configured, preventive devices are going to miss attacks. They're naturally going to have a high false negative because they must have a 0 false positive. And remember, false negative and false positives have an inverse relationship. So if you go in and you make your false positive 0, you're naturally going to make your false negatives very, very high. Now, preventive is good because it does stop attacks. However, because they have that high false negative, we still need detective measures. So that's why we want to go in and make sure that we have prevention is ideal, detection is a must. So the first problem, as we pointed out, is companies are putting almost 90% of all their energy and effort on preventing attacks. And when prevention fails, they don't have anything left. So you want to go in and put a lot more energy on detection. What I always go in and tell organizations is it's okay if you get compromised. It's okay if you get broken into, if you detect it in a timely manner when the damage is small. I had somebody in one of the comments go, Eric, I believe that I do security correctly and I got special super mojo ninja skills and I can actually achieve 100% security. And the answer is you can't. Now, you might define what you mean by that. If you're saying that your security means you can detect all attacks within 30 hours, then yes, you can. But that's not 100%. 100% security means you never get breached, you never get compromised, you never have an impact. And that can't happen if you have a functional business. Because let's face it, if you look at the basic mathematics of security, 100% security means 0 functionality. As soon as you add functionality, you're decreasing security. If you have any functionality at all, especially a lot of functionality, you are way below 100% security. So our goal is to detect attacks in a timely manner to reduce the impact to our organization. But if you're functioning and your company is making money with computers, you will never be able to prevent all attacks. You will never have 100% security, and you must put a ton of focus and energy on timely detection. Now, I know at first you might not like that. You might say, well, what's the point? If no matter what we do, we're going to get compromised, why do we even try? Well, let me give you an analogy. Is there anybody listening to this episode of Life of a CISO that you believe you are 100% perfect specimen of a human and you are 100% healthy? Of course not. Right? Some of you might joke around, right, or kid, but the point is this. Nobody is 100% healthy. Nobody is going to live forever. No matter who you are not 100% healthy. If you go to a doctor, there is not a single doctor on the planet that will look at a person and say, you are 100% healthy. There are always issues and problems. So no matter what, you are going to get sick. Now, the question is this. Why do we eat healthy? Why do we exercise? Why do we take supplements? Why do we do all those things if we know that no matter what we do, we're going to get sick? And the reason is this. Our focus with our health is not saying we're never going to get sick. It's on minimizing the frequency in which we get sick and the impact it has on our lives. If somebody gets sick once every 5 years, you don't consider them weak. You don't consider them low immune system, right? That's really good. On the other hand, if somebody is getting sick every other week and they're put in the hospital, you would consider them weak. So it's the frequency and impact that we want to focus on. So it's the same thing with cybersecurity. We shouldn't go in and say, well, we can't prevent every attack, so therefore why try? The reason we put all our measures in place is because we want to minimize the frequency and minimize the impact that any breach has on your organization. But the bottom line is this. If you have not detected a breach in the last 24 months, it's not because it's not happening. It's because you're not looking in the right place. You need to change your perspective. You need to do a better job on detection because guess what? The attacks are out there. You need to do a much better job on detection. And one of my favorite examples of this is a longtime friend and a mentor and somebody I tremendously respect is Steven Northcutt. He did a lot with cybersecurity. He started and built an amazing organization called SANS. And I remember a long time ago, it was probably 20 years ago, we started doing multinational tours. So we would go in, and normally at SANS, you would teach once every 3 to 4 months. And we decided, what if we went in and we taught for 3 weeks straight? So we went and we taught in Singapore. Then we flew to Australia and taught a week. Then we flew to Hawaii and taught a week. At the time, it seemed like an amazing fate, right, of human, right, power. Now it cracks me up because a couple years ago when I was leaving SANS, I would sometimes do 6 or 7 in a row, right? But at the time, right, 3 seemed like a lot. And I remember after we finished all 3 of these, Steven and his amazing wife said, let's go out on a boat and let's do whale watching. And I mean, it was one of the most beautiful days. I mean, the sun was out. It was just gorgeous. And we're on the boat and we're in the back and I'm looking out of the left side. And I'm just commenting, saying, wow, this is so amazing. I really appreciate you doing this. Such a kind person. And I'm saying, but you know something? Wouldn't it be great if we got to see a whale? And I'm looking at the left side of the boat, right? Looking out here, and I don't see any whales. And as I say that, Steven's hand comes on my head and boom, it turns to the right. And on the right side of the boat is this most beautiful creature I have ever seen. It was so amazing, so majestic. Now, let me ask you a question. If I was on that boat by myself and I was only looking at the left side of the boat and that's it, and I didn't see any whales, would it be an accurate statement for me to say there are no whales in the ocean? No. Just because I'm not seeing them doesn't mean they don't exist. It means I'm not looking in the right spot. As soon as Steven switched my head to the right side of the boat, all of a sudden I saw the most beautiful whale I've ever seen. So it's about changing your perspective. If you're in your network and you're saying you don't have any attacks, nobody's breaking in, you don't have any compromises, think, is that really true? Is it really true that there aren't any compromises at all? Or maybe, just maybe, you're not looking in the right spot. So hopefully for the remainder of this podcast, I'll go in and I'll do what Steven did and I'll change your perspective to show you where the cyber whales are in your network. And that all starts with proper and correct detection. Now, there's another mistake that people make. Most organizations focus their energy and effort on inbound traffic because the attack is coming into the network. And once again, with an obsession with prevention, which most organizations have, an unhealthy obsession with trying to prevent all attacks, inbound prevention makes a lot of sense. But let me ask you a question. If I'm trying to detect an attack, so I want to detect a data breach, I want to detect data exfiltration, I want to detect critical information leaving my organization, when does that happen? Does that happen on the inbound or the outbound traffic? That happens on the outbound traffic. So the problem with organizations is not only are they spending most of their energy and effort on prevention, but they're spending most of it on inbound. So next assignment, take that accurate, up-to-date network diagram and ask your unicorn to bring you your 4-colored pen and take out a new color. Now I want you to go into that diagram and all your security devices that are inbound, put an I, and all your security that's outbound, put an O. Add them up. If you're like most of our clients, you ready for this one? 95% of all your security is inbound and less than 5% is outbound. So if you want to do this correctly, It's inbound prevention and outbound detection. That's how you go in and catch the adversary. You want to look at your outbound traffic and you want to be able to properly detect and see what's going on. So it's inbound prevention and outbound detection. Now, it's a little more trickier than that. We have to add another layer onto this. I know some companies that do have some inbound and outbound. Here's the problem. Most security devices that companies have on their network today require payload analysis. So as you all know, a packet going across the network has headers. You have your IP and TCP and UDP headers, and then you have your payload. Almost all of the solutions like behavioral analytics and correlation and all those, they rely on looking at the payload to look for behavioral characteristics that could be suspicious or malicious to set off alerts to be able to catch the adversary. And guess what? If they are able to read and analyze the payload, they are very, very effective. So what is the tool that attackers use to go stealth mode? What is the tool that attackers use to take their attack and drop below enemy radar and go stealth? And that is encryption. Now, so many people make the mistake where they go in and say encryption stops the adversary from reading my traffic. So a lot of companies today, they're using SSL and SSH, and they're using point-to-point encrypted tunnels across the board because they believe by encrypting their traffic, it will stop the adversary from reading that information. That is only partially correct. Let me give you the full statement. Encryption stops anybody from reading any traffic. Now, yes, encryption stops the adversary from reading your traffic. But encryption also stops you from reading the adversary's traffic. So if the adversary is encrypting their traffic and your security solutions are doing payload analysis, you lose because it won't work and it won't be effective in order to do that. So my rule of thumb is if you're buying any technology today, it must be able to work and detect attacks with encrypted traffic. If it can't work with encrypted traffic, don't buy it. Because almost all the attacks out there today are doing CNC command and control channels, and they are setting up encrypted SSL traffic. And the reason is simple. Most companies allow outbound encrypted SSL or TLS traffic, secure socket layer, transport layer security out of their network because that's what web browsers use today. So adversaries are smart. When they break into your network and they set up a pivot point and they set up an outbound traffic, they're going to make it look like SSL TLS. So your outbound proxies are going to go, okay, it's outbound web surfing, good to go. And it's going to allow it out of your environment. And they're going to bypass all of your security measures. So not only must you do outbound detection, but you must make sure that you're able to handle encrypted traffic. Now, the old school way of doing it is to decrypt all of the traffic. And this is often done with outbound proxies. And it's not bad. My general rule that I tell all my clients is, if at all possible, all traffic leaving your network must go through outbound proxies. So they must always go through an outbound proxy that can analyze, assess, and look for the traffic. And one of the common methods of doing that is to decrypt all of the traffic leaving your organization. While that's okay, it is problematic. Because if you're decrypting all of the traffic leaving your network and people are doing personal things like setting up medical appointments, accessing their bank, or putting other personal information, you could be violating a lot of different regulations because you are now accessing personal private information without making the client aware. Second, it could be very, very time consuming. And third, you have to put your cryptographic keys on that device. So if it gets compromised by an attacker, they now have access to your cryptographic keys. So while that solution is okay, the better solution is to analyze traffic without having to decrypt it. There are actually patterns and components that are indicative of an attack traffic without actually decrypting the traffic. So at this point, I would like to introduce you to the Dr. Cole Challenge. Now, I came up with this a long time ago when they had the ice bucket challenge. And my philosophy was simple. If somebody could challenge you to dump ice on your head, why can't I challenge you to be secure? So the Dr. Cole Challenge is this. I want you to look at your outbound traffic, and you can do this with any NetFlow device. You can do this with any SIM. Most firewalls, most tools, whether it's Splunk or ArcSight, will let you do this. And I want you to look at three things. I want you to create 3 top 20 lists. So for your outbound traffic, and you want to do this for your clients. Now, if you want to do it for your servers, do 2 different tests, because if you combine client and server traffic together, it will actually skew the results, and you'll see why in a minute. So you want to do the Dr. Cole Challenge once for clients and once for servers. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to create 3 separate independent top 20 lists. So the first one, I want you to look at all the outbound traffic, and I want you to create a list of the IP addresses leaving your organization that have the longest connection. So if we're looking at TCP traffic that has the longest TCP connection. The second top 20 list is I want you to look at the IP addresses that have the highest number of connections. And the third top 20 list is I want you to look at the IP addresses that have the largest amount of data. So you're creating 3 independent lists. The first list has the 20 IP addresses in your organization that have the longest connection. The second one are the IP addresses that have the highest number of connections. And the third one are the 20 IP addresses that have the biggest payload or the most data. I then want you to look at IP addresses that are on all 3 lists. Any IP address that's on all 3 lists is a compromised system. I challenge you to prove me wrong. Now, is this 100%? Probably not. But I'm waiting for that data point, because every time I give people the challenge and every time I ask them to do it, I always get the same response. And the same response has 2 components. They go, Dr. Cole, first, I didn't realize how easy it was to catch compromised systems. I didn't realize how easy it was to catch adversaries in our environment. And then the second response is, we've spent over $30 million on security over the last 3 years. We had a compromised system that none of the technology we bought caught, and your Dr. Cole Challenge within a week found and caught the compromised system. And my response back is, next time will you pay me the $30 million? Right? So, no, but the point is twofold. One, catching compromised systems is not hard if you look in the right spot. It's the same thing with the whale watching. Finding whales is not hard if you know where to look. If you don't know where to look, it can be very frustrating and very devastating and very time consuming. Next, if you know what to look for and you look in the right spot, catching compromised systems is not difficult at all. The problem is most technology you're buying today not only overcomplicates the problem, but simply requires payload analysis. So just go back to your network and take your accurate network diagram, and one more time, fetch your magical unicorn to get you your 4-colored pen, right? You got 2 colors left. And I want you to go in, and any technology that requires payload analysis, I want you to put an X through. And if you're like most of my clients, most of your security will have X's through them. So make sure that your solution doesn't require encrypted traffic. Now, let me show you the magic. I didn't show you the magic. The magic of the Dr. Cole challenge is this. If you're looking at number of connections, length of connections, and amount of payload, guess what? Encryption doesn't matter. Whether the traffic is encrypted or not, I can still tell the length of the connection, I can still tell the number of connections, and I can still tell the size of the payload. So that's what makes the Dr. Cole challenge so magical, is encryption doesn't matter. You can encrypt all day long as the adversary, and I will still catch you with that Dr. Cole challenge. So if you want to be an effective CISO, if you want to be a world-class CISO, make sure for your organizations that you're working for, you have inbound prevention, outbound detection, and you have solutions that can still detect the attack and outbound traffic, even if it's encrypted. And if you go in and you're focused on inbound prevention, outbound detection, and solutions that work, even if it's encrypted, you will win at this game called cybersecurity. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of a CISO. Please leave your comments below. Please let me know if there's topics you would like me to cover on future episodes. Otherwise, until next time, and there will be a next time, thank you so much for listening and have an amazing day. This is Dr. Eric Cole signing off.